And so we have three panelists. We've got Bonnie, Annie, and Evan, who are going to be joining us and sharing their stories. Along the way, I invite you to, as you're listening to their story, I invite you to write any questions that you may have. If you want to keep those questions anonymous, event organizers, can you raise your hands nice and high? Go ahead and take that question to them, and then they will bring it to me, and we can pose the question that way. Or if you would like to ask the question yourself, go ahead and write it down if you would like, or we invite you to come up to this microphone right here by the projector, and you can read your question and allow all three of the panelists to respond to that question, or if you want one of them to respond, please specify which one you would like to respond. So we're really excited to have you here and to get this conversation started. It's very important. And so you guys, I'm really excited to hear your stories. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go ladies first. And Bonnie's going to get started for us. And I'm going to let her share her story. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of UCAP. And we'll enjoy the next hour and 15 minutes together. So go ahead, Bonnie.
Thanks, Jeff. So a little bit about me before I tell my story. I guess those are kind of the same thing. My name is Bonnie Young, a native of Issaquah, Washington, very beautiful place near Seattle. I am a student down in Provo. I've been down there for quite some time. And I have a very special place in my heart for this topic of talking about pornography in relationships. Before I start my story, I guess I just want to preface what I'm going to say by acknowledging all the different experiences that are in this room right now. I recognize that many of you may be presently in an addiction or in a habit of viewing pornography. I recognize that some of you have relationships with individuals touched by pornography addiction. Some of you are dating someone with an addiction, or not dating because you're afraid of that, whether your own use or others' use. And I just want to convey to you that there is hope. No matter what situation you're in, that there is always hope. And sometimes that hope isn't hope in something, hope in the one outcome, but it can be an outcome that can help us develop as people. And so that's what I want to start out with. Now I'll tell you a little bit about my story. I am presently pursuing my master's degree at BYU in marriage and family therapy. My focus of my research is pornography and relationships. So my expertise, I guess you could say, revolves around how pornography influences the user and also its effects on relationships. So what happens in a relationship as a result of pornography use. But the reason I initially got so involved and interested in studying pornography was it touched my life. And I grew up as a relatively ignorant young girl. We didn't really talk about sex in my house growing up. I really couldn't even say the word bra until I graduated high school. I was just kind of afraid of that aspect of life. I came home from my mission and I thought, oh, my life's going to turn out great. Going to marry a wonderful, worthy young man, and pornography it wasn't even in my radar. And I attended a fireside, a lecture on pornography use when I got home, and I thought to myself, how interesting that good people have this issue in their lives. I was kind of dumbfounded. And then I found myself in a relationship with an incredible young man. And when I say incredible, I mean incredible. Came from a very strong family, very intelligent, very driven. He was very active in his faith, and really on the outside, everything looked quite perfect. But then I found myself kind of having just these feelings that maybe pornography was a part of his life, and I didn't know how to approach it. And I didn't know where I could go to get help, to know how to talk about it. And I guess this is a bit of a confession to you. I butchered it. I messed up. I kind of took the approach of, this is a screening question. If you pass, we'll continue. If you don't, we're over. I took it from the position of, I don't have any problems in my life, but you do. So let's talk about your problems. And he was humble and he was open. And he told me about his past. He was in a very vulnerable position. And because I didn't understand what addiction was, I didn't understand what recovery and healing truly looked like, I kind of freaked out and I ran away. And that experience has kind of haunted me because it makes me wonder, what message was I sending to him? And what message by that also, what message am I sending to myself if I slip up or if I am imperfect sometimes? But that experience also served as the catalyst for me to try to understand pornography addiction and pornography use in a very passionate way. I started getting involved in research as much as I could by myself on the internet, which is kind of scary. It's scary to do like searching about pornography use on the internet. Don't really recommend it. Like, go to reliable sources, I guess. And as I reached out and as I spoke with other people, and as well as entering kind of into the academic world with Dr. Brian Willoughby and Jason Carroll at BYU, my eyes have been open to what real recovery looks like, that pornography addiction is something that, when understood, is still bad, but it doesn't have to be scary. And since then, I'm still unmarried, but since then, in my dating relationships, I've been able to approach it, the issue of pornography use, without fear and with lots of love and concern. And I want to convey to you that as you understand pornography addiction better, as you get educated, which is what you're doing right now, and as you acquaint yourself with people who have gone through this, people who have had this issue, and also as you approach yourself and ask yourself, okay, am I healing? What do I have to heal from? That the issue becomes much less intimidating, much less scary, and that there is always hope. So that's my story.
My name is Annie Vandermyde, and also before I share my experience, there are things that I want you to know. First, I have put a lot of thought into what I will and will not share. Really? Crying already? It's great. And my hope is that something that I say today can touch at least one of you, and that my experience can help you. Second, my journey is mine, not yours. I believe in a higher power that I relied heavily on, and still do, and I hope that you have a higher power also that you believe in. But if you don't, I ask that you respect that that is how I came to my conclusion in my journey. In preparing for this, I was reading through my journal of when I was in the midst of my trials, and I felt impressed to share this entry with you. And it is long and it is very personal, but I hope that it can touch you. I am hurt. I hurt inside so bad. My heart has a physical pain that at times intensifies with every pulse. I feel like I am speeding through a maze that doesn't really have an ending. I put all of my eggs in one basket. Isn't that what I was supposed to do? Isn't that a part of what was expected of women in the church? We are to hearken unto our spouse, our priesthood holder, as they hearken unto the Lord. I am not innocent in all of this. I could have done things a lot better, but I did not break covenants. I did not step out on my husband. I did not lie over and over. I feel like I am chasing this dream that will never be my reality. I think that the hardest thing about all of this is how completely oblivious he is to the impact that he has had on me and the kids. He gets it intellectually, but does not show remorse. It's almost like there is a part of him that is unable to see pain in other people. All he does is try to tell me how to feel and how not to feel, and how fast I need to forgive. When I'm in this frame of mind, I can't imagine this working out. This isn't what I deserve, and my heart aches just writing this. I get that the addiction doesn't have much to do with me, but I truly believe that if I came from a wealthy family, if I was prettier, if I was skinnier, that he wouldn't have treated me this way. I feel worthless most of the time, and I feel sad and pathetic and worthless. How am I supposed to feel worth anything when I'm treated so bad, talked to so poorly, and reminded of how stupid I am often? It's hard to feel any sort of happiness when this is my reality. My husband, who loves me more than anything else in the world, according to him, beats me physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. He does not see me. I hurt and it won't go away because I keep the pain here. I don't want to be nice to him. I don't want to forgive him right now. I want him to see my pain and I want him to suffer. But he isn't. I am. My pain is not his, and even though I feel it should be, if I forgive him for all of this, it will no doubt happen again. The vision of my future is fading, and the man I know he can become is slowly walking away, and I'm left feeling like a fool who has been tricked and manipulated and played. Before now, I held on to the man that I was told that he had the potential to be, the man that I dreamed of. It wasn't going to be a reality. I'm the fool. He will always choose himself, and he will always service himself first. Now I've chosen to kind of give a timeline of how I found out, when I found out. When we were dating, I asked him, kind of in an accusatory way, like, have you ever been involved in this? Have you ever looked? And he lied and said that no, he had never. When we were engaged, I asked him again. And he said that it was something that he had looked at when he was younger, but not a problem. When we were married, I would ask him often. It's almost as if I knew. And he would say, I don't remember. It's been so long. I don't remember the last time. He would skirt around it so much. And I said, can you give me, a time frame, like last week, last month? Oh, I don't even know. It's just been so long. So there was no honesty in that. And when he would admit, I reacted awful. I just thought, gosh, this disgusting pervert. That is what I thought. That is what I saw. I didn't understand addiction. And I didn't know how to respond to him properly, and for myself to respond properly. Our relationship wasn't super awesome from the beginning, but I had made a commitment to this man and was going to stick by him. He was verbally and physically abusive to me. And about 5 years into our marriage, he got extremely depressed and ended up losing his job. And I pleaded with him, please let this be rock bottom. If you have anything that you need to get out, please get it out so that we can have this be it and we can move forward from here. And at that point, he admitted to having an addiction. And at that point, I did research in what an addiction was. And I was able to feel compassion for him and love for him and sorrow that he was dealing with such a monster. And he was dealing with it alone. He really was, because I wasn't there for him. I didn't understand it. He found a job. Depression kicked in again because he wasn't dealing with anything properly, and he ended up losing another job. And actually, he quit that job. And he was dark, and I knew that something had happened and that he wasn't talking to me about it. But I just had this feeling, and I would ask him and he would deny it, and I would ask him and he would deny it. And the darkness kind of took him over, and he ended up beating me pretty severely. And I feel like I was just an empty bag of bones at that point. And I would watch other couples and think, gosh, that's what marriage is supposed to be like, and mine is nothing like that. And I wanted so badly and prayed so hard for change to happen. So I pleaded with him to get help specifically for his addiction and to get help for his depression. At that point, he admitted to being physical with another woman, and that's when I asked him to leave the house. I anticipated it only being for one weekend. I didn't think that I would ever leave him, although there were day after day, month after month, I wanted to so bad, but I didn't think that that was my path, not a choice that I could make by myself. And the longer that he was gone, the healthier that I got, and it helped me realize what a toxic situation that I was in. And I ended up leaving him. And I did not leave him because he had a pornography addiction. I left him because I was in a toxic situation that was not changing. I ended up falling into Lifestar, and I questioned why am I here? I don't have the addiction, and I sat here as a single woman with this group of people that were, trying to keep their marriage together. Why am I here? I didn't understand or know at all how much trauma I had been through and how much I needed to work through, and how educating myself would then empower me to make better decisions and to help my children and to heal myself through educating myself, and to be surrounded by people who were also suffering the same pain that I was suffering. I have a few things written down, but I don't feel like I need to share those. So anyway, thank you.
Hello, check one. Okay. Hi, my name is Evan Vilos. I'm also a product of Lifestar, the Lifestar program, but in Salt Lake City. I checked into Lifestar in 2011 from the advice of Dan Gray, who I was meeting with one-on-one at the time for pornography addiction and also masturbation. I'll just be explicit. I'll be honest. Sorry if it makes anyone feel uncomfortable. My journey started with addiction early. The signs of it started very early. I was about 5 years old when I'd flip through the JCPenney catalog and look at the toy section and then stumble over a lingerie section and sort of go, whoa, what are these feelings? And from there, I didn't really think much about it. I was so young. About 13 years old, I discovered masturbation on my own. From the first time I masturbated for myself, from that moment on, I was then locked into a pattern of that I couldn't get out of. And I was very aware of that early on. I'm a member of the LDS Church. And so shame, the feelings of shame and embarrassment were very, very much alive and grew as time went on. My frequency, as far as how often it would happen, would be anywhere from several times a day to, I'd have a month or two of a period of sobriety, whether that was pornography or masturbation. As far as pornography, I got very curious about the things and the images that were available just around me in the house. I'm currently 33 years old, so this was early 90s and internet wasn't necessarily available. So this might be good for parents, but there was a lot of availability for imagery that I could use in assistance to masturbation. And that is very much the combination, the connection. It gives the very same effect that pornography does, whether it's explicit or not. So I did that for a number of years. I was able to serve an LDS mission. During the time that I was young, I admitted things to my bishops for years and years, seeking help and seeking some sort of hope for a life that was free from these addictions, pornography and masturbation. Never having anyone be able to really clearly tell me that it never occurred in their life. And I found that kind of disturbing and troubling and hard to swallow. I went on my mission in 2000, and I had the greatest moments of success in sobriety while I was on my mission. I was very proud of that, and I allowed myself to feel really good about that. But at the same time, I wasn't flawless while I was on my mission, and that drove shame to a level that was very, very high. When I got home from there, the internet was available to everyone, and I frequently viewed pornography, sometimes hours on end, and when I was alone. And I found myself getting in an entrenched pattern of that, and feeling very unhealthy and feeling very depressed and sad about what I was doing, and very shameful. And the whole time I maintained a very healthy social life, with none of my friends knowing or not being able to talk to anyone about it. I left for Hawaii to go to school, and there I actually found a little bit more sobriety because I was away from a personal computer. I was around a lot of people, and that was really healthy for my environment. But before I came home in 2008, I ended up getting a laptop and then getting back into it. I met my wife shortly after I came home. We were kind of just dating at the time, but we sort of dated. We more or less just played around and did the dating game thing and never really ended up committing to each other. And at that time, I was very, very much like involved with pornography. I noticed that there would be periods of times when I was dating somebody that I would actually pull away from it. But when we kind of went our separate way, I went back into it heavily. While I was in Hawaii, I did come across a man named Michael Buxton, who's a therapist, and he specializes in sex addiction. And I met with him. He then referred me to Dan Gray, and I looked for Dan Gray when I got back to home from Hawaii, and we started meeting. In 2011, I checked into LifeStar, and I started doing the group program because I wasn't making any progress with Dan meeting one-on-one, and I was really troubled by that, but he just kept saying group, group, group. So I went to group, and shortly after I started making progress in group, I started dating my wife, Jordan, my current wife, Jordan, and she's here. Right off the bat, when we started dating, I was doing really hard, intensive work to become sober and clean of, or just free of these traps that I'd been in. And I was making some pretty good progress and doing some really hard, intensive work. About 2 weeks into dating, to a point where we were then talking about being committed to each other, we then had the conversation, and she held me at gunpoint, which was very smart and wise of her. And I felt an obligation it was a scary time for me as a single male. Not a lot of people knew about my addiction. I wasn't really wanting to tell anyone about it, for fear of what people would think of me. I had very much had the same stereotypes that follow people that have addictions, or how people view others with addictions. To make a long story short, we ended up finding ourselves in really troublesome situations because of the addiction. I caused a lot of harm, a lot of hurt, and some pretty painful feelings. And that was a big part of my recovery, to see that side. The whole time I was viewing pornography, I didn't think that I was hurting anyone other than myself, and that was okay. But I was wrong, and I ended up allowing that addiction to come in and manifest itself into my relationship. And we took a long time to work through that. And I'm currently just under 3 years free of masturbation and pornography. And we had a good amount of time in our dating life where the recovery process was allowed to come in. And we are married happily, and there are no secrets and no lies. And we've been like that for a while, and that is the healthy way to live. That's my story.
As many of you can imagine, opening up and sharing your story is extremely vulnerable. And so I just want to pause for a moment and just give these three a round of applause for doing that. So. I also want to recognize that Each one of them have major supports here for them. Evan has his wife here. Will you stand up and just be recognized? And can we give her a hand, please? Thank you. And Bonnie has her friend Sam here. You just stand up and be recognized for a moment. So let's give him a hand. And Annie has her. I know Annie a little bit better. She's often spoken to me about. I think you're the youngest of how many? 5 brothers or 6 brothers? Oh, you're in the middle. Okay. So, and I think some of your brothers are actually here. Is that correct? So, if they could stand up.
Yeah.
And your parents, excellent. Okay, let's give them a hand. I want to thank you guys for standing and mostly for being here to support our panel members and to give them hope and healing. I want to get into your questions, but before we do, I'd like each of you to spend a couple minutes answering the question that I have for each of you about what it was like when, and maybe think of the most prominent time or maybe the first time that you reached out for help and shared your story the first time to someone. Is that okay? Is that okay to kind of ask that? And does anybody want to go first or? Okay, Annie, go ahead.
I lived in seclusion for a long time. I had the perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect life, the perfect kids. My life was perfect on the outside. So the very first time that I confessed or opened up and spoke about what I was going through, I opened up to my dad. And I was able to tell him everything, and it felt so good because while we're hurting and we're in so much pain, we need to have a group of people that can surround us and love us. And because I did that, I could then enlist that help. And I plead with you, if you are suffering with this addiction, allow your spouse to find somebody to talk to because it will help them so much.
Either one of you.
With the first experience that I shared with you earlier, he asked that I didn't tell anyone. So I felt kind of trapped because here I was with all this information that would affect me significantly, but I had no one to talk to. And I thought, okay, I can't tell my mom because she knows who it is. I can't tell any of my roommates because they know who it is. And so I sought counsel from my bishop. He didn't know who my boyfriend was at the time, so that was safe. But I would agree with Annie that while it is important to respect confidentiality, it's necessary to have people that you trust that you can talk to, that can see clearly, that perhaps have a better perspective than your narrow view in a relationship, and that can provide a lot of support and love.
The first time I had reached out to anyone, I think it was after my mission when I was actually heavily involved in pornography, more than I'd ever been. And I reached out to my mother, and I don't know if I recommend that necessarily. I think the shame went up. She truly didn't understand it, and bless her heart, she was very sympathetic, but at the same time slightly angry and confused. And so I had a really difficult time reaching out for a long years and years. I usually would poke out and say, hey, I make a comment here, and this sort of go fishing for clues as to who might be involved or who could help. But the moment that really changed for me was when I reached out to my bishop and my singles ward in Hawaii, and then he referred me to a counselor. I walk in, and it's this guy who I ran into selling a surfboard to. He was visiting at BYU Hawaii, which is where I went to school, and he was an expert in sort of doing a lot of research with sex addiction and whatnot. Anyway, I had a lot of relieving conversations with getting out what was going on in my life with him It was a trusted, confidential environment, and I needed that. I needed somebody that knew something about it. And that, recovery didn't come for years and years, even sobriety, but after that. But it eventually did come, and I think that was the first step that led me to that road.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions here, and we'll go ahead and handle some of these first, and then from the audience, if you'd like. How have you balanced what you have learned about addiction with your spiritual goals for a long-term relationship? And we'll just start with Bonnie and go on down the line. So if you want me to read it again, that's okay.
Could you read it one more time?
Okay.
Lots of words.
How have you balanced what you have learned about addiction with your spiritual goals for a long-term relationship?
Thank you. I have been very surprised at how the two are directly correlated. Especially when it comes to seeing ourselves for who we really are. And in my opinion, how God sees us. I think sometimes it's easy to think in black and white. Either I'm good or I'm bad. Either he's a pervert or he's not. Either he's an addict or he's not. But I think that for me, understanding addiction and understanding recovery, that it's a process. It's a process of becoming, of changing, of transforming. For me, that's like the core of my spirituality. I believe that God sees us on a spectrum, and he wants us to develop and to become. And I think as I've understood that recovery is that process, it has made me feel so much closer to God. It's changed the way that I see myself. It's changed the way that I see people around me.
For me, it's not just what I've learned about addiction, it's what I've learned about trauma also, that going through it and experiencing it and being active in trying to heal, going through the healing process, it has connected me spiritually in a way that I didn't know existed. And as far as relationships go, it allows me to look at somebody who is suffering, even if I haven't suffered the same pain. I've suffered trauma just like they have, and so I'm able to connect with them and to really build on those relationships.
What I've learned from addiction, I guess I should say more along the lines of recovery. I guess I might have to tailor this question to myself, my situation. My long-term goals in my relationship with my current wife, what I've learned from addiction is how to have a healthy, not from addiction, but from recovering from addiction, and what I've learned about addiction and where it really comes from. It's taught me to look inward and then focus on the things that I can do to make my relationship better. And for the thing that stands out foremost, and I think is crucial, is transparency. That's the way to approach it. I think if you're dating somebody, or if I were to go back, it would be to be honest about what I am and what I have and where I want to be, and never let up with that.
Thank you. Okay, the next question that I have is, how do I bring up pornography in dating? I'm worried that my boyfriend is involved. And if he is involved, what can I do to support and help him? So who'd like to start with that?
Are we all going to answer every question?
Yeah, okay. Yep, we can go there. And I'll hand this to you if you'd like.
So there's ways that you can approach asking, and there's answers that you need to look for. I almost feel guilty saying this, but if he's said that he's never viewed it, he's probably lying. What you need to do is ask him if he's viewed it. If he admits to it, then ask him where he is right now with it, and then ask him what he's actively doing to make sure that he's not viewing it. If he can answer those questions, then you know that he's in a good place with it. If he can't answer those questions, in a loving way, you can approach him and say that you have this fear that he's viewing it, and that you know there's hope for people who are addicted to this, and maybe come prepared with some resources and be educated and just be loving about it.
I agree with what Annie said. I would also say that the pornography talk in dating, just like you shouldn't have one sex talk with your kids and it's over, it should be the same way in dating. It shouldn't be like, okay, tonight we're going to talk about pornography and then we're never going to have to talk about it again. It should be an ongoing conversation. And in the world that we live in today, it should be kind of simple to have reasons to talk about pornography. Hey, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, actually, I went to a conference and da-da-da-da-da. And I feel like there's a lot of, if you're looking for reasons to incorporate pornography into conversation with the person you're dating, it's all around us. One thing that I would suggest is you need to pay attention, of course, to the words that he says as he responds. But you also need to listen to his heart, the tone of his voice. Is he defensive? Is he humble? Is he truly seeking recovery, or is he making it not a big deal? Is he aware of how you feel? And I'd say the answers to those questions, in my opinion, are more important than the yes or no that he gives you.
I 100% agree with that. As being a person that was fired that question too when I was involved with pornography. I couldn't say more than them, other than the only thing that I was very worried about as a person, I wasn't going to open up with Jordan if I felt like she was going to tell all of her friends or put me in this box that was then a non-candidate for an unhealthy person and not acceptable. Doing that with taking care of yourself and thinking about yourself, which I think, and I personally believe, is number one in this situation, it's a difficult situation to balance those two. Do I take care of myself? And do I let myself get sucked into this, which you don't? Or how do I allow him a safe place where he can open up and talk about it? Because that could be a changing moment in his life. And so, but I would say first and foremost, be kind and respectful, but really truly think about yourself and his heart. So,
Some other things to look at are Bonnie's experience. Is that okay if I draw from that? If you ask the question and then they close you down, meaning you can't talk to anybody, they cut you off, that's a bad sign. The darkness doesn't help. You have to stand in the light. So that's one indicator that it's a pretty significant problem. Second, if you ask and they confirm and say, yes, it's been a problem, the second question needs to be, what has been your solution to that? And then just sit and listen. If they give you specific examples of what they have done to work recovery, that's a very good sign. If they basically said, oh, I just took care of it on my own, that's not a good sign. I've been working with individuals that struggled with this for over 10 years. I haven't met everybody in the world yet, but I haven't met anybody that has done it by themselves. And so if they don't really have a very specific answer of what they have done, that's a pretty good sign that they haven't done much and they need to do more. And so it's a concern that is brought up. Okay, does anyone want to come up and ask any questions? I've got a bunch here if we don't. Okay, all right, go ahead and step up to the mic, please.
With as prolific as pornography is becoming these days, I still got some siblings who are single and dating, and can the girl have the expectation that there is a guy out there who's not been involved, and let's say I don't find that hard to believe, like you were saying, most likely they have been to some extent been introduced to it. How do they best approach that, knowing that, how can they mentally prepare themselves for the fact that every guy I'm going to date out there probably has some involvement?
That's a wonderful question. I think the first thing we need to understand is just because someone has seen pornography does not mean they're an addict. For some people, the first exposure will lead to an addiction. That's all it takes for some people. But for many, many people, one exposure or two exposures or an experience with pornography in the past does not mean that they are a current addict. And I think we need to understand that. As far as prevalence in some of the research I've been involved in at BYU right now, we've been running a pilot study, and of a sample of religious young adults, we're finding that it's more likely than not that that young men and young women will have been exposed at least to pornography, if not have sought it out themselves. I think it's nice not to be ignorant to that fact. But I think just because they've been exposed in the past does not mean that they're an addict. And how they've reacted, kind of how Jeff said how they react to that is a better indicator of whether you should date them or not.
Do you want to add to that? If you want to add to that, yeah, please. Okay. One thing that I want to add to that is a very wise relationship principle as you're dating is you go in with your eyes wide open. And healthy relationships start with healthy relationship principles, which is open communication and freedom to bring up subjects that are important and that will affect relationships, which pornography is definitely one that affects relationships. So talking about it in an open way is very important, despite what the experience, whether it's severe addiction or just exposure. So it's a good principle. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to add two things before I ask my question of making sure that a lot of us recognize that pornography typically, especially for women, is not visual, but context, books and articles like that. That's where a lot of my friends are consumed with. And then also that, like Bonnie was mentioning, that it's not just men, it is women. But my question's mainly to Annie and then also to Evan, your name is right, so I'm someone who was affected by a parent. And so how do you go about, especially with your children, of helping them recognize that they are still of worth, even though their parent has had this problem?
My children are really young, and they don't know about many of the problems that we went through, and I'm okay with that. But to prevent them from falling into a place where they allow themselves to be with somebody who treats them in such a way or doesn't take the time to work on a problem of any sort, just teaching them of their value and of their worth early on so that they can know what is okay and what is not okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Your worth is your worth and no one else's. You are your own person, and you have your own journey to through life. And although your parents have quite a big influence over you as an individual, if you are somebody that has a parent involved, it shouldn't. I'm not going to tell you how you should feel, but it's important to know your own self-worth, and that is the sky's the limits with that. As far as how I'm going to approach or how we're going to approach our children, I think education was a huge lacking factor in my story. And I had a wonderful bishop who, out of 20 bishops, came at the right time in the right place and gave me a book that educated me on how I was supposed to feel comfortable with my sexuality as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church. I had struggled with understanding how to feel sexuality comfortably in that environment. And so education is how I'm going to teach my kids. I'm not going to be telling them that their privates are something that, especially when they're really young, that they should be proud of their bodies and I'm not going to shame any sort of aspect of what they do, but I am scared. So there's a future, and
So just some guidelines that this is kind of related that are helpful for disclosing to children, taking into consideration that just because a child may be chronologically mature, but their age may suggest that they're mature, but emotionally or cognitively they might not be. Here are some guidelines. Number one, does my child have the emotional ability and resources to cope with and process and deal with what I'm about to tell them about addiction with myself or a family member? That's number one. Number two, does my child have the maturity to understand privacy and confidentiality? So for instance, you don't want to tell a child who you don't have high confidence is they're going to go and tell all the other kids in the family as well that might be younger. So those are some two really quick guidelines that can be helpful in that pursuit. Do we have another question? Yeah.
what was the name of the book? Oh, it was "And They Shall Not Be Ashamed," and I forget who the author is.
If you wouldn't have asked, give me a second. So the question was, what was the name of the book? Someone Google it real quick. Say it louder. Laura Brotherson, And They Will Not Be Ashamed. And you can pick that up at Siegel Book or Deseret Book, or on Amazon. And They Will Not Be Ashamed by And They Were Not Ashamed by Laura Brotherson. Okay, good question. Other questions? Go ahead and step up to the mic, please.
I'm interested to get all three of your perspectives, and just a couple of things before I ask the question. When I first started in recovery, the thought of telling a woman that I had this addiction was terrifying. Like, how could I possibly tell her and not have her run away screaming? But as I got into recovery, I've kind of gone the other way, and I feel like it's very important to be upfront and to do it relatively early. My thought is, she needs to know, and then it's her choice of I'm in for this or like I'm not. And so the last time I wound up doing it like on the second date, and actually went pretty well. So I'm curious on your perspective, because I don't know if there's a good time or a bad time, but like, what do you think is a good time?
Awesome question. And I don't think that there's like a right answer for everyone. I think it needs to go with the progression of the relationship. I think there needs to be some level of trust between you. That's a very vulnerable thing to do. And it's a very personal part of your life. And I would say that in order to disclose that to someone, you need to trust that they will see you as more than just your addiction. They need to see you as a person, and that is a part of your life, but that there's a lot of other beautiful parts of your life. And so yeah, I'd say to have established that trust before you disclose.
I would agree. I think every relationship progresses at a different level. I've had, in the dating scene, I've had men talk to me on the first date, and some of that scared me. But on the second date, there was somebody that opened up about, not about an addiction, but about something that he had done in the past that he was working on. And we were at that level that I felt like I appreciated it. And he sent me a text later that night and said, I understand if you feel like you want to tell your family. He knew I was close to my family. I understand if you want to tell your family. I just ask that you tell me when you do. And so, allowing the openness, the open communication, it needs to start early, but just make sure you have that connection before it happens.
Again, I agree. Not much more I could say. But if there's a level of commitment arising, it's probably time. Other than that, I couldn't say more than what's already been said.
Yeah, that's another good principle to talk about in relationship formation. Casual dating is not the time to bring it up. Either, and I want to mention it's both sides of the fence, that you've been affected or that you are struggling with the addiction. When there is some degree of commitment is when it's really an obligation that person has to put themselves out there so that the other person has information that they can choose and digest and understand. So the higher level of commitment, the better. There's a great book, How to Not Marry a Jerk, and the author shares what's called the relationship attachment model. And there are 5 concepts that he lays out about how the more you trust, or the more you know about someone, the more you trust, the more you can rely on them. The more you rely on them, the more confidence you have on them, and the more confidence you have on them, the more the different levels of physical touch increases. If you're really wanting to learn more about that, I encourage you to check that book out. So we have another question here.
First of all, wanted to thank each of you for being so open to the variety of situations that each of us are in. I think the questions that have been asked are evidence of that, so just thank you for your openness and your understanding. I wanted to ask a question. Each of you have kind of arrived at a point where you've come out of a place of maybe a bit of hopelessness or despair, and you're now at a place where you can speak to an open audience about your situation. Maybe you could walk me through where you found hope, and maybe some advice that you could give us that are looking for hope, to how to seek that out and how to find that.
For me, this has been a real process. There's been steps of learning to love myself despite what I've been through. It's been learning to look outside of myself and looking around and seeing what good I could do to help others so that I could take the attention off me in a good way. And also, hope comes from being actively seeking healing, and healing is a process. And so I would encourage anybody that is hopeless to seek out one of the many programs that are out there and actively be a part of that program. And I think that's where a lot of the hope comes from.
That was a really difficult thing for me to do, is to reach out and to find the hope. I think I didn't really truly find hope until I started attending the group phase 1 at Life Start, where there was a lot of individuals who were there to talk about, that are there with addiction, and some further along than others, and they're really open. It's like a place where you hear nothing but truth most of the time. And it's as a person that's going through something or trying to overcome an addiction, that is an environment you absolutely need, and you need to feel that. And finding hope, I think that is the best place to find the hope. As far as keeping an eye out for your time frame, my time frame was, there were certain points at which I was ready for certain things, and I would just say, if you're actively trying to overcome an addiction, be very aware of who you meet and the capabilities that they might have to help you. People will come into your life. If you are actively pursuing it in the least, and I say that in the least very clearly, somebody will pop into your life. It happens time and time again. I've been with guys for over 3 years, watching stories come from struggling with addiction to getting away from it and becoming free. And there's always someone that comes in that can help you. But that's usually getting things out of the dark in a safe environment. Is keep your eyes open for that and keep hope alive, because it is there.
Okay, we have a audience member ask Evan's wife Jordan a question, and I've checked with her, and she's actually comfortable in answering it, so I'm really grateful for that. So I'm going to invite her to come sit up here for just a moment. Evan, can you move that mic over here?
Yeah.
And Jordan, why don't you go ahead and read the question, okay, and then you've had a moment to think about it, and then go ahead and respond.
Okay. So this question says, to Evan's wife, how and when did the addiction issues come up? Did you go through counseling on your own or with Evan? And how have you gotten past this huge hurdle with Evan? The first question, how did the addiction issue come up? Me and Evan knew each other. We were friends for a long time, and so there was already a connection with Evan and I in the beginning. When we actually started dating, I'm also part of the church, the LDS church, and I was kind of in the middle of preparing for a mission, and then Evan, came in and we were hanging out, and I asked him to go to the temple with me to go do some temple work, and he said he wasn't able to. And so me being not even thinking twice about it, just because I had friends previous to Evan and me dating that had opened up to me about their pornography addictions. And that prepared me for Evan's, I think. And so I simply and calmly just asked Evan at that moment, because he said he wasn't able to go to the temple. And he had mentioned that he had a meeting that night. And I just kind of put two and two together, and I just said, why can't you come to the temple with me? And, he was scared. And it was obvious that he was nervous to tell me something. And he just calmly and openly admitted it. And it wasn't shocking to me because I knew Evan. I knew who Evan was. I knew Evan was my friend. I knew Evan's heart. I knew that I liked Evan. And so when he told me, I didn't have an understanding of pornography myself. And so I kind of just accepted it. And where he told me about group and about therapy, and it was actually a really good conversation. I think we were lucky to have that. I was lucky to have Evan who was honest with me, and he didn't lie about anything. And he just told me his whole story. And that really put us into a place where we could move on to a relationship. The second question was, did you go through counseling on your own or with Evan? So I had been in a relationship previous to Evan that was emotionally abusive in a way. And so I was dealing with anxiety before I was dating Evan. But like Evan said earlier, we had a situation while we were dating where there were unhealthy boundaries physically. And I was put into a situation where I felt like I was kind of taken advantage of in a way physically. And it actually caused trauma for me. Because it was connected, It was connected to the addiction. And I was really, really, really angry that I now had a traumatic experience possibly because of an addiction. But I had the trauma because of how I saw the situation. And Evan didn't see it the same. And there was a miscommunication, and there was not open communication about it. Therefore, we were put into that situation. So yes, I did go through counseling. I actually did meet with Evan's personal counselor at the time, and that was extremely helpful. And then I met with my own counselor, who is he a Lifestar? I met with John Murdoch. I don't know if anyone is aware of who he is. I think he's a Lifestar Network therapist, and I was able to go through an EMDR type therapy because I was kind of going through a somewhat post-traumatic stress situation. And so I was able to get through that though while dating Evan, which was not easy. It wasn't normal for me. It seemed like, why are we doing this? Why are we still dating? But we, as weird as it may sound, that situation and the way we both approached it with each other with honesty and open communication and listening to one another and understanding each other, a really horrible situation turned into probably one of the biggest strengths that we have as a couple. And now we have this is a little it's just open. We have a very healthy sexual relationship. We have a very healthy marriage. We have a very honest marriage. And it's taking a traumatic situation and turning it into something that we both are now just very, very healthy and very happy. But it wasn't easy, and I won't admit it's easy. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Okay, we've got a few more questions and not a lot of time. So I've got one right here, and just in light of time, I'll just have one response. So whoever wants to take it can take it. I'll read the question. My husband is in pretty decent recovery and has been since we were married. So I tend to leave him alone and let him deal with his addiction on his own. What should I be doing to make his road easier without taking inappropriate control or mothering him? Does anybody have a feel for that they want to take?
I will be honest, I never experienced the not mothering side of this. But what I can say is to somehow, it's going to take both of you. It's not just something that you can do alone. It's something that's going to take both of you to have the open line of communication. Make sure that there are boundaries set, that there are consequences in place for when those boundaries are crossed. And that will take both of you. And also make sure that he can be open. If he's out of town and calls you and says, hey, I'm struggling, that you don't freak out or you don't have, gosh, I knew that you shouldn't have gone. It's just like, I am so glad that you called me. Just if you both know that he can trust you and you can react in a way that's going to be loving and understanding because you are married to this man, that's going to be the most beneficial way.
Okay, awesome. Just a note about that. This couple demonstrates a couple who has an awesome opportunity to get connected even more and strengthen their recovery even more. The old adage, 2 heads are better than one, is still true. Pornography addiction is something that affects a person 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I tend to worry about couples who are disconnected in their recovery. The more open, which are daily check-ins, the better. This is not a let alone and let's see how this person handles themselves type of an issue. So this couple has an amazing opportunity to strengthen their recovery and sometimes working with a therapist to help them understand what type of conversations they can have to strengthen their recovery and strengthen their marriage at the same time. Okay, next question. Unless someone wants to go from the audience. Oh, he was first. Why don't you go first here? Come on over here. Give him L. Is that what your shirt says there? Yeah. Okay. Don't do that.
My question is, I struggle with pornography and the sexual addiction. How do you get to that point of actually starting to date? And because I'm really scared of that because of the addiction side of that. And then also with that, I make excuses for myself of like, I don't have a car, so I can't even pick them up, or I don't have the money for that.
First of all, what's your name?
Nathan?
Nathan, thank you. You're amazing. Thank you for asking that question and sharing. So go ahead and...
When I was going through recovery, I took a step back from dating, and I wanted to, and I think that was good for me. But as you're making progress, I think you should feel comfortable and okay about going out and being social and meeting people and trying to meet new people and make friends is the best way to go about, I guess, your situation. From my advice, you have your own journey that's ahead of you, which is probably going to be, it will play out and you'll discover that. But definitely get out, be social. But when you do find the opportunities to date, do it. It's healthy. It's something that's real, whereas pornography is not. It's a fantasy. It's not a reality. And so the more you can do to get out, but just remember the advice that these girls gave you with when to tell the other person. You have an obligation, if you are in a committed relationship, to open that discussion up. So that was a good question.
Okay, one more question for Bonnie. How did you get the courage to, after your experience with your prior boyfriend, to start dating again?
That's a good question. I would say the courage came honestly from a higher source who helped me see people as they are, as a whole person. And I think once we do that for ourselves, we see ourselves for who we really are, and who for other people for who they really are. It makes forming relationships a lot easier.
And Annie, if you or Evan want to add to that, that's okay if you want to. So the question was, how, after your experience, how do you have the courage to date again?
Right after my divorce, I dated a lot, and I had to take a step back, similar to Evan. Just I wasn't in a good place, and it wasn't fair for me to start these connections with men that I knew was going nowhere, and they were anticipating for us to progress. So I'm now working on, I've stopped dating for a little while, and I'm now feeling in a good place, and it's not necessarily courage that it takes to start dating again. It's loving yourself and knowing that you are a good person, that you do have something to offer to somebody else. Once you're in that place, then you'll be fine.
You okay? Okay, we have
Great
about
answer.
a little over. Oh,
You just give me props. You just said good job.
okay.
Thumbs up on me.
All right, good. Okay, we've got one here. We've got about 5 or so minutes left, so go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, Jed, also a recovering addict, pornography, masturbation, escalation. And I was just thinking, like, when this brother right here, everyone, like, felt his vulnerability, right? It's like we applaud that. And yet I'm wondering why then is there such a focus on still being closed, right? Including, like, dating. I mean, I understand I don't want to be obsessed with talking recovery, right? Although sometimes when you're recovering, like when I'm recovering, it's like, and may I never recover. Like, may I recover from death, but may I never recover from life, right? And so it's like, sometimes I want to be open about it, but I don't want to obsess. But why are we saying, thank you for being vulnerable, man. We applaud you. You're being transparent. And then we say, keep it closed mouthed, right? And that's my main question. And I've found it's been very refreshing, not just in dating, but even otherwise, right? To bring up where I'm at, right? And then you meet some live star lady at my Zumba class, and she's talking about recovery, right? So,
Thank you for your question. Okay. So yes, it's hard to be open, and that's why we're doing this. So hopefully to make it less difficult, so we're not as closed. Any other audience questions? Yes.
This question specifically for Annie. When she read her little thing at the start from her journal, it could easily have been my daughter writing the exact same words. And but it made me think. We often think, how can we help the addict and support him? I just wanted to ask her. As my daughter's father, some of the things I try to do, I think aggravate the trauma. What is it that parents and friends can do to help the spouse or who's really the victim in all this to get through it?
There's different levels and different time frames where I needed different things. Right away, when I was separated, or even when I was married, the things that helped me were when people didn't say, "How can I help you?" They just helped me. I have 3 kids, and I have them all the time. People would call and pick my kids up and take them to the park. Oh, it was such a relief. I had one friend say, "Every Wednesday, don't make dinner. I'm going to make dinner." I didn't have to ask. Little things like that make a huge, huge difference where I am in my life. Loving and supporting in any endeavor that they are choosing to make is extremely important. Everybody's different, so I don't know exactly how to tell you how to help your daughter, but encouraging her to get involved with a group of women who have been through similar situations helped me not to feel as crazy as I felt. And take a look at where she was 5-10 years ago or 15 years ago. What did your daughter like to do? I couldn't tell you what kind of flavor of ice cream that I liked 1 year ago. I couldn't. I didn't know. Look at your daughter and see where she was at the time when she was your happy little daughter, and take her and remind herself to just take her out and do those kinds of things that she liked to do, because probably she likes to do those kinds of things. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Good. Okay, this will be our final question. What does real recovery look like? And if each one of you could take just a moment to obviously that's a big answer, but maybe one thing that you can think of that makes the biggest difference for your recovery and healing journey. So Bonnie, why don't we start with you?
I would say real recovery requires complete honesty with yourself and with others. And that requires courage a lot. It's hard to admit that you have a problem. It's hard to admit that you need help, that you can't do it by yourself. But being completely honest with yourself and also being transparent with others, I think, is a key component in real recovery.
Real recovery for me is never ending. It's hard work every single day. It's structure. It's love for myself. And it's allowing me to have bad days, because they happen.
Of course, I would agree with those things as well. True recovery, I think, when you are going through recovery, you absolutely have to be honest with yourself and with others. There's no questions. There's not an option. There's something about bringing your secrets out to light that tends to really damper and strangle the addiction. Of course, there's a lot more to it than just that. A lot of work, put in the work that's being asked of you by therapists or whatever group you're in. And then the other thing is, I'll just share an experience. As I moved further and further away from the addiction, and it gets easier. And that's something that an addict called, I was able to call an addict who was 5 years down the road from his addiction, and he said it just gets easier. And I can tell you from personal experience, it absolutely just gets easier, and it feels great, and you do not feel the same. You feel completely different, and that's what it looks like.
Okay, I want to thank all of you audience members who participated, and especially I want to thank each of you panel members for doing, all of us this huge service of just being open and seeing a little bit into your lives and helping us to relate to that. So let's give them a round of applause, everybody.